All right, so welcome to the deep dive where we take what you send us and like figure out, what it all means. We
Yeah.
get into the nitty-gritty.
The real insights?
Exactly, the juicy stuff. And today, well, I think it's safe to say it's a pretty heavy topic. We're diving into the war in Ukraine, using all the articles you sent us to get past, just the headlines and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's seen the headlines, but there's so much more to it. So the big question you sent us, right? Who are the real winners and losers in this whole thing? We got to go deeper than like, you know, just who's winning battles on the ground.
Way deeper because this impacts everybody. Ukraine, obviously, Russia, but then the West, China, even the whole global economy.
Totally. It's a tangled web, for sure.
Okay, so let's just start with Ukraine. I mean, there's no way around it. They're bearing the biggest brunt of this whole thing.
Absolutely. Right off the bat, the articles you sent are just, they're filled with the human cost.
Yes.
We're talking tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians dead. And then you look at the physical destruction.
It's mind-blowing.
Over $500 billion in damages to cities, power plants, roads, you name it. And their economy collapsed. GDP down over 30% in 2022 alone, and millions of Ukrainians fleeing the country. It's just devastating.
And then you add in the attacks on their power grid. I mean, that's created a whole other crisis on top of everything else, right? Millions of people without heat, electricity, basic
Yeah,
necessities.
you're talking about a full-blown humanitarian crisis right there.
It's just grim. But looking at the sources, I mean, you see this incredible resilience from the Ukrainians too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from what I'm seeing in these reports, they were expected to fold pretty quickly, but they haven't. They pushed back in key areas, and that's with the help of the West, obviously. The billions of dollars in military and economic aid that the U.S. and Europe have been sending over.
Yeah, it seems like they've really become like a symbol, right? A symbol of resistance. And that's got to count for something on the world stage. Stronger ties with the West, maybe even like more leverage in the future.
Oh, no doubt. There's a real moral victory there, and that has real-world implications. But it's also tricky, right? Because that expectation of support, it might be hard to keep up over time. So yeah, they won some battles, but the long game, it all hinges on that continued support and how they rebuild their economy. It's a long road ahead.
It is. All right, let's shift gears now and talk about Russia. The sources we've got, they really paint a picture of this like initial expectation of a quick win and then that just totally falling apart.
Yeah, that's a huge point. And the cost to Russia, it's been massive. You see it right away in the casualty numbers. Western estimates are saying over 300,000 Russian troops killed or wounded.
Yeah.
That's just staggering.
It is. And I guess it really highlights how much they underestimated the Ukrainian resistance, right?
Absolutely. And then you've got the sanctions, the economic hit they've taken. We're talking over 15,000 sanctions from the West, and they're designed to cripple Russia's economy. And to a large extent, they are.
Yeah.
Especially the restrictions on oil and gas.
Which is like their main source of income, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've got those sanctions, but then also they're basically cut off from the Western financial system. Yeah. They're facing these huge trade restrictions. And then on top of that, NATO expansion, right? Finland and Sweden joining.
It's like everything's backfired on them.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
But looking at the articles, they have made some gains, right? They've got control of parts of eastern Ukraine and Crimea.
That's true. It's definitely not what they were hoping for initially, but it is something, a tangible gain. And they are adapting economically, kind of pivoting towards China and India, the global south.
But it's not quite the same, right? I mean, those markets, they're not as strong as what they had with Europe.
Exactly. It's a workaround, not a solution.
And then there's the domestic situation. Putin seems to have really consolidated power, using this war to silence any opposition.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend we're seeing. He's tightened his grip, ramped up military production. It's like, in a way, this external conflict has actually strengthened him domestically, at least for now. But who knows how long that'll last, right? The economic pressure is building, and there's always the possibility of internal cracks that we just don't see.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to project strength, but underneath, it's not so clear.
Exactly. So, yeah, Russia's definitely taken some hits, but they're hanging in there. But it's a precarious position. They're kind of stuck in this, war of attrition, and without some major breakthrough, it's hard to see how they come out on top.
Okay, so let's move on to the West, the US, and the EU. They're the ones who are really propping up Ukraine, right?
Absolutely. Their role is crucial. And you can see from the articles they've achieved some of their goals. Weakening Russia, for one. Russia's military is depleted, their economy is hurting, and NATO is stronger. Getting Finland and Sweden to join, that's huge. It shows a real united front against Russia.
Plus, all the defense companies are making a killing.
Yeah, the military-industrial complex is definitely booming right now.
But all this comes at a cost, right? All that aid to Ukraine, the increased defense spending, that's got to be putting a strain on the West's own economy.
Oh, definitely. The billions they're pouring in, that's a huge burden. And then the energy crisis in Europe, that's directly related to cutting off Russian gas. Prices have skyrocketed, inflation is up. It's hurting everyday people.
It's like they're winning the geopolitical battle, but maybe losing the economic one.
Yeah, it's a tough trade-off. And then you see these cracks emerging politically, right? Questions about how long the West can keep supporting Ukraine at this level.
So there's this question of sustainability. Can they keep this up?
Exactly. That's the big unknown.
Now, China's role in all this, that's really fascinating. They're playing this like neutral card, but the sources are saying they're actually benefiting quite a bit.
Oh, they're playing it smart. I mean, look at their energy situation. They're getting Russian oil and gas at a huge discount. That's a major win for them, and it frees them up to keep their economy growing.
And it seems like Russia is getting more and more dependent on China, right?
Absolutely. And that gives China leverage. They're suddenly a much bigger player in the game. Plus, you've got the U.S. so focused on Ukraine that maybe, just maybe, it gives China some breathing room to make moves in their own backyard, like with Taiwan.
So they're like indirectly winning by staying out of the fight.
Exactly. But there are risks, right? The U.S. is putting pressure on them not to provide any military tech to Russia.
Because that would change everything.
Totally. That would be a red line.
Hmm.
And even though they're neutral, some countries see that as, basically siding with Russia. That could hurt their image in the long run.
So they're walking a tightrope.
For sure. But right now, it seems to be working. They're getting the resources they need, boosting their influence, all without getting their hands dirty.
Okay, last piece of the puzzle, the global economy. The war has really shaken things up, created winners and losers all over the place.
Big time. It's like this whole global reshuffling is happening. And yeah, there are clear winners. Defense industry, for one. Look at companies like Lockheed Martin, Rheinmetall. They're seeing massive profits. Everyone's buying weapons.
Makes sense. And it's not just weapons, right? Energy producers who aren't Russia, they're making bank too.
Yeah, like the U.S., Norway, the Middle East, they're filling the gap left by Russia. And then you've got countries that produce things like wheat, oil, natural gas. Their prices are up. They're raking it in.
But on the flip side, there's the average consumer, right? They're getting hammered by higher prices for everything.
Exactly. This war has made inflation worse everywhere.
Yeah.
People are struggling to make ends meet. And developing countries, especially the ones that rely on Ukraine and Russia for grain, they're facing food shortages.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, it shows you how connected everything is.
Right.
And then there are the investors who put money into Russia. They've lost everything.
Billions down the drain.
Yeah, a harsh lesson in geopolitical risk.
So, looking at all this, the big takeaway from these articles, it's that there aren't really any winners here, just different levels of loss and adaptation.
That's a great way to put it. Ukraine is fighting for its survival. Russia is facing this long, slow economic decline, even if they're trying to project strength.
The West is winning some battles, but at a cost. And China, they're playing the long game, waiting to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, it's a really complex situation.
Yeah.
And the sources end on this note that, the global order has changed forever.
Which really makes you think, what does the future hold? What do you think are the most likely long-term changes in terms of like international relations or the global economy or even, security alliances? Because this war, it's not just about Ukraine and Russia anymore. It's changing the whole world.
It's a huge question, and honestly, I don't think anyone has the answer yet. But it's one we all need to be thinking about.
For sure. And that's something for all of you listening to think about too. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.